Good morning. No, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this new edition of 1 Hour with Europe webinar series. My name is Nienke Buisman, and I am the director of the NTNU Brussels office. And today we have the honor to have with us Nienke Buisman, which is the head of unit Global Approach and International Cooperation in R&I for Asia, Africa, Middle East, and External Relations in the European Commission, DG Research and Innovation. So as you've seen, I've studied a lot how to pronounce you and how to basically tell the people who you are and where you operate. Today we are talking about the very recent, I would say, achievement that the Commission got, which is the launch of the EU Innovation Agenda. And we would like with Nienke to understand a bit what it's about, what has been the outcome of this important launch event that happened in Nairobi, if I'm not wrong, last week, and what could be the opportunities and roles for stakeholders. Of course, for us as a university is the possibility for university and higher education institution to contribute to the political objective of this agenda, but of course is an agenda which is open for us as stakeholders, and I'm sure that Nienke can give an overview for the one of you which are interested to understand if their institution can participate. Before starting, just a few extra information. Nienke will give a presentation, and afterwards we will give you the possibility to challenge her with questions related to your personal or comments. But we are going to operate like a real workshop, so you have just to reserve your right to intervene by raising virtually your hand in the Q&A box that is down of your screen. Just write your name and we will make sure that you will be allowed to open your camera and microphone and pose your question directly to Nienke. By doing it, you agree to appear on our recording. So be aware that the session is recorded and that by basically appearing, we expect you to be part of the final record that will be stored in our archives and in our YouTube channel. So, Nienke, how is going with the EU agenda? What will be our possible contribution into it? And welcome.
Thank you very much, Massimo. Thank you very much for your welcoming words, and thank you as well to NTNU to organize this. I'm here today with my colleague Vincenzo Lorusso, who is really the brain behind this innovation agenda, and will join me for the question and answers sessions later today. Yeah, a lot to tell, because this African Union, European Union innovation agenda is not yet final. So you still have the possibility to influence it, to be involved in it as stakeholders. Indeed, last week already in Nairobi, we had a big stakeholder event, of which I will say a few words. But today's webinar fits perfectly in the year 2020, which we have dedicated to stakeholder consultation. But let me just check if I can change the slides.
You should, in principle.
With the arrows. Doesn't seem to work.
Then say next, and my colleagues will answer.
Okay, I'll say next. Sorry, will be a lot of nexts today.
No problem.
Next, please. So what I'm going to do today, indeed, is to give you a perception of what this EU innovation agenda is, where it fits in the policy discussion, and what is in it for higher education institutions, both in the conceptualization and in the implementation. Next, please. So in short, this EU innovation agenda is really going to be our vision, our offer for the next few years in our cooperation, in the cooperation between the African Union and the European Union in research and innovation. It was thought of at the ministerial, the first ever ministerial that we held 2 years ago, where both sides said, look, the innovation ecosystems are very vibrant and getting more vibrant on both continents, but there is something more to do. We really need to get better at translating the research and innovation efforts, endeavors, projects that we have been doing over the last 10, 20, 30 years, and getting better at translating these results into products, services, business, and jobs. So really making the impact locally on the ground, and this is what the innovation agenda is about. We came with the idea 2 years ago, and we developed a working version hand in hand with all the different stakeholders, and it was already acknowledged earlier this year by our heads of state at the summit, and it's fully integrated in the whole policy context. I will say more about that today. Next slide, please. So this is in short an overview of the innovation agenda, and I will go into the details. As I said earlier this year, we released the working document of this agenda, and the year 2020 is really dedicated to stakeholder consultation. This agenda has 4 clear objectives. You can see them on the screen. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I would still like to read out the 4 objectives. First, make it real. Generate impact by design, the second one. The third one is to strengthen people, communities, and institutions. And fourth is really to learn from what we have already, monitor and scale it up. We have translated these objectives into short, medium, and long-term actions around the 4 priorities of the cooperation between the European Union and the African Union in R&I. Public health, green transition, innovation and technology, and capacities for science. And this is built on the work we've previously done. We have done a very thorough gaps and needs analysis. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, yeah, perfect, great. Okay, so here, firstly, completely embedded in the policy dimension of our cooperation. This is just an aspect of the summit communique earlier this year, where there is the reference to this agenda. We look into, yeah, I try again, but now it doesn't work anymore. Okay, good. So it completely fits in the policy context on both sides. For example, the African Union Agenda 2063 on the African Union side, or on the European side, we have in 2020 adopted a new comprehensive strategy with Africa, and in 2021 the global approach. So the vision, policy dimensions are set out in these documents, and this innovation was actually also called for in the global approach. So we're building on these policy sets on both sides. Next. Try again. Yeah, perfect. Okay. And so what we have done, working hand in hand with our colleagues in the African Union, first step was to look at what already exists. We took stock of multiple sources. For example, ongoing activities, but also results of pilot initiatives that we have launched in the past. For example, the Africa-Europe Innovation Partnership that we launched in 2019. We put together an advisory group with high-level experts on both sides. We asked to reflect on the questions of the innovation agenda and advise us on what type of action would be really in need of support, and of course discussions at the political level. Next slide. As I said, we have done this and we are still doing this hand in hand, because what is important, if we want this agenda to be successful, it needs to be inclusive. It needs to be inclusive of all innovation actors. So it's not only an institutional endeavor. Of course, it includes the African Union Commission and the European Commission, different departments in the European Commission. It's not just DG Research and Innovation. We work hand in hand with DG International Partnerships, for example, DG Education, but also the Joint Research Center. We work hand in hand with member states on both sides, but then it also opens up to all the other different stakeholders, higher education institutions, research institutions, both public and private, and importantly, the private sector, startups, enterprises, etc. and finally, civil society organizations. So we try to be as inclusive as needed. Next slide. Yeah, good. So one other important element of this agenda is that we don't start from scratch. As I said, we did a very thorough needs and gaps analysis, building on what exists already. And in the last 10 years of our cooperation, we have mostly focused on research partnerships in the 4 priority areas of the cooperation. And here you just see an overview of the number of projects and the budget that has gone into this. Of course, this is very input driven, but we have also looked at the results of these projects. Next slide, please. And that has brought us to this gaps and needs analysis, where that we could divide in 5 pillars that need additional support or focus in the cooperation going forward. The innovation ecosystem, innovation management, knowledge exchange, including tech transfer, access to finance, an important element, and human capacity development. And this is how the agenda is built up. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for higher education institutions? We involve them, they're involved in 3 different pillars or stages of the innovation agenda. First of all, really in the conceptualization of the agenda. Higher education institutions have been, let's say, the number one stakeholder group involved in the stakeholder process over the last year. But also, secondly, the second pillar in the implementation, especially in the parts of the agenda that relate to education, skills, capacity building, knowledge exchange. And thirdly, the coordination of more innovation-driven action. So higher education institutions can help in bridging across sectors, but also linking the different innovation stakeholders together. Now it works. In a nutshell, before I move on, so the innovation agenda, what it means for the higher education institutions, it really knocks on the door of universities and higher education institutions to help open up to interdisciplinary collaboration with other sectors, such as private sector, civil society. And this should be done in a very inclusive way, as inclusive as possible, making sure to empower youth, women, indigenous people, and local communities, etc. Let me now move from the needs and gaps analysis, the objectives, towards the actions that we are proposing with this agenda. As I said, we have divided them in short, medium, long-term actions with a 10-year dimension, all around the priorities of the cooperation: public health, green transition, innovation and technology, and capacities for science, and then a set of cross-cutting. I'm not going to list them all, but the boxes in red actually highlight the examples of, let's say, most relevant for higher education institutions, where, for example, in the short term, one of the cross-cutting actions is the networking with other stakeholders. If we look at the capacities for science priority, one of the actions is to strengthen the R&D cooperation between the EU higher education and governmental institutions through knowledge transfer, teaming, twinning, learning, mobility activities. So these are some of the short-term actions. Then we move into medium term, where again, it is by the priorities of the agenda, where in the area of capacities for science, for example, we're looking into promoting joint master and doctoral degrees between universities in the African Union and the European Union, the mobility of researchers, but also reskilling, upskilling of citizens, for example. And in the long term, with long term, as I said, we mean about 10 years. Again, divided in the same priorities. I can highlight, for example, the support that we aim to give to strengthen centers of excellence in the African Union. So in short, to give you a bit of an idea of the deliverables that we are aiming for with this innovation agenda, is, for example, the creation, the incubation and expansion of new businesses and services. So it's very practical, very hands-on. The application of innovative tools in agriculture, medicine, climate, energy, manufacturing of health technologies, or just in short, sustainable tech transfer, but it's linked. It's really a package. So it combines the research cooperation, the translation into businesses, jobs, products, but at the same time also linking it to the training and the capacity building in the institutions involved in this in the cooperation between the AU and the EU in RNI. Maybe just a little words on the place of humanities in this agenda. We see it mostly, let's say, in the pillars of capacities for science and cross-cutting issues, aiming, for example, to strengthen really the collaboration between science, policy, industry, and society, empowering, as I said already, youth and women, but also more by tackling the multidimensional actions in the 4 priorities of the agenda. So this is what the agenda looks like at the moment. The second step, of course, is how are we going to make this happen? We are, even if the agenda has not yet been adopted, I will say later that we foresee the adoption of this agenda in the middle of next year, but we are all together reflecting on how this can be implemented in the future. And there, we have at the EU level several tools, instruments at our disposal. But important to say, it's not just about EU instruments and tools. We're working hand in hand with our member states also to mobilize their existing programs or upcoming programs towards the implementation of this agenda in a Team Europe approach. And the same goes for example, private sector, financial institutions, and our partners on the African side. But at the EU level, we are planning, of course, to mobilize Horizon Europe, the upcoming work program 23-24, that is expected to be adopted next week, with a set of calls that we call the Africa Initiative 2. We've done this for the first time in the work program 21-22, where it's really a combination around 30 topics in the priority areas of the agenda that aim at supporting its implementation, including with a stronger focus on the innovation dimension. Another example to give is the existing Global Health Joint Undertaking, EDCTP, that also launches calls, mostly specifically to support the public health part of this agenda. Looking more at our colleagues in DG International Partnerships, they have, of course, the Global Europe program and launched earlier this year the Global Gateway Africa Europe Investment Package. And there is about 300 million of budget to support more the capacity building actions of this agenda. Looking, for example, at strengthening centers of excellence in the green transition. Other actions are still currently under discussion in-house. So that's a little overview on the EU side. So at the same time as we are drawing up this agenda, making sure it can be adopted at the political level next year, we are already mobilizing, reflecting on its implementation as well. So really one package. So let me now maybe spend a little bit of time on the year 22, which we dedicated entirely to the stakeholder dialogue process. We're already at the end of the year. We're in December now. So just a little reminder that earlier this year we launched an online public consultation. Over, I think, 300 stakeholders replied to this online public consultation, of which the results were published in a report that is available on our website in October. And last week, we all came together in Nairobi for a big stakeholder event that really gave us the opportunity to discuss in person. I mean, over 350 people came there in person, and about 200 people were online. That gave us the opportunity to discuss whether the draft version of this agenda addresses the right needs, whether there's anything missing, whether the actions that we're proposing are actually linked to reality, whether there's anything missing that we absolutely need to address before adopting it. If you want to know a bit more, have a bit more background on the history and how we came to this agenda, we have published under the lead author of Vincenzo, who's here with me today, an article on the cooperation. Coming back to probably the stakeholders that mostly are connected to this webinar today, higher education institutions. In this stakeholder process, you've been like the biggest group participating in this very extensively from both sides, from both continents and from many different countries on both continents. So this happened online between February and June, but several of the networks of higher education institutions have also been extremely helpful in reaching out to others, of course, to make this stakeholder consultation process as inclusive as possible. And you see, for example, the regional, the RU Forum, the Regional Universities Forum for Capacity Building in Agriculture in Africa has been extremely supportive, as well as the African Research University Alliance together with the guilds. And you've also been extremely involved in preparing and in the stakeholder event in Nairobi last week. As I said, we published a report of the online stakeholder consultation in October, and October, I think you can find it here on our website. So this is in short, I mean, a bit in numbers, what I have told you already, the type of stakeholders that have participated in our consultation process. The biggest group is our public higher education institutions, but you can see that we've been able to reach out to all the different stakeholder groups, including also the private sector. These are some of the institutions that have been giving us their comments, their advice, and we would like to thank all of you very much of participating in this stakeholder process. You can see these are some of the organizations on the African Union side, and same on the European side. But even also outside of the African Union and the European Union, some of the organizations have given their comments on the draft agenda, such as Michigan State University, for example. So thank you very much to all of you. And even if your logo is not here and you have been involved, thank you very much. This innovation agenda is for and with the stakeholders, and I hope we can show that a little bit with this slide. So in terms of the findings, so this is related to the online consultation. In general, this agenda was very much welcomed. What is also very much welcomed and underlined by the majority of the respondents is that it doesn't start from scratch, and this is actually an important pillar. We are building on the good results of the cooperation from the past, and it really is collaboration across the different sectors of the innovation space. It also, as I said already, it is a package, so it doesn't separate research and innovation from the capacity building. It's bringing the two together and taking a holistic approach of capacity building, both at the individual level, training, but also at the more, let's say, research infrastructure level, the institutional level, including in this package, the monitoring and evaluation and learning. So once again, we're building on what works, and we want to scale that up. While what you can see also from the results, researchers and research institutions are seen as the key beneficiaries, or to be beneficiaries of this agenda. The importance of involving all groups was highlighted at several occasions. So the inclusiveness that we would like to project with this agenda. So lots of numbers once again, just showing that whilst the most of the respondents came from higher education institutions, and that this agenda seems to be focusing or most of benefits to researchers, it does include all of the different groups. And finally, a little word on the stakeholder event, where we are extremely happy about what we achieved. It was really the culmination of this stakeholder exercise process that we went through for the full year. It happened last week. I already said that over 300 people actually joined us in Nairobi. Yesterday we were looking at the statistics, and we had over 30 different countries, for example, on the African continent. Of course, when you do an event on the African continent, the majority comes from African countries, but we also had about 30–40% of the stakeholders from Europe. Those were very much involved in the policy dialogue from member states, but also really from higher education institutions, universities, startups, innovation initiatives in Europe. And we presented this event, as I said, it was really meant and took place in a very interactive way to discuss whether the needs and actions are right, or whether anything is missing. And it was, we organized this through workshops on the first day. But on the second day, we also already moved a little bit towards the capacity dimension of this agenda and organized several trainings, how to prepare a proposal, for example, for Horizon Europe projects or for Erasmus+. We did trainings in the area of IP management, open science, and I think I mean, at least personally for me, the best part of this stakeholder consultation was in the afternoon on the second day, where we organized this AU-EU Innovation Fair, Meet the Innovator, where about 30–40, I think, startups pitching for their ideas towards their peers and investors on how also to contribute to the implementation of this agenda. And then there was part in the hotel where they could also already showcase their ideas. So this was a very nice combination of the different dimensions of the agenda. You have here just the overview of the program. Perhaps some of you have participated, and yeah, always nice to show that it really happens. So this is where you see some of the pictures. I think this was the opening. You see my director in green on the screen, Maria Cristina Russo, who was with us for the full event and is a very strongly a driver of the development of this agenda at the EU level. I don't remember how many pictures I have, but I should just share it a little bit with you. So this is the innovation fair. I think you see some of the people who are pitching their idea. You see the slides on the screen as well. Yeah, the same. This was the innovation fair. Picture from the room on the other side. And I think, and this was then really where, I mean, as you can see, one came even with I think it was an electric motorbike showing, so this is what it, I mean, I didn't fortunately get a chance to go there, but I was told it was extremely vibrant and we got lots of, of applause afterwards. I think I'm almost at the end of my slides. I already referred to the implementation or the reflections we are having on the implementation at the EU level on the side of teacher research and innovation with the upcoming work program 23-24 of Horizon Europe, building on the previous one where we launched this Africa initiative, where we hope this is really a way for beneficiaries, stakeholders to more clearly see how we are contributing with Horizon Europe to the priorities of the cooperation, but also on the participants portal to, you know, give a very easy overview of the possibilities in the program. So this was the first version in the first work program. We are also now slowly seeing the results. And what we can see for the moment, we have 113 signed grants with more or less 300 participations. What we can really see from this Africa initiative is that it has increased, and especially for certain countries, really the success rate of their success rate in the program. So in terms of the number of proposals that they sent and then the grants that are finally received. So it seems to be, I mean, of course, these are some first results. It seems to be really promoting or increasing the success rate of cooperation between EU and African Union researchers and innovators in the program. You can also clearly see that in terms of the grants signed, the majority is, this is okay by budget distribution, but we will also have it by participation. It is fully aligned with the political priorities that we set together with the African Union. And that it is that the type of participants are really from different sectors, research, higher education, a little bit for the moment in this Africa Initiative 1, a bit less from the private sector, which we also hope we can address with the second Africa 2 initiative that we hope will be published. I mean, you have seen it probably already because the work program is pre-published since a couple of days, but the full version is expected to be adopted by the college next week. And so you will have access on the participant portal to all the different topics supporting this innovation agenda and the collaboration with the African Union. I think I'm there now. To conclude, really in short, we believe that this AU-EU innovation agenda really provides, we say unprecedented, but let me not say that, but really an opportunity for universities and higher education institutions to leverage their crucial role in the R&I landscape, but also to foster links with other innovation players beyond academia. Because higher education institutions, universities are, of course, an integral part of the shaping of the innovation agenda. I hope I have been able to show you that this is in fact the case. But we also very much count on you to be part of the implementation, but also facilitators of this vision and that we are developing hand in hand. Yeah, I think I'm at the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for having listened to me. And we are, maybe Vincenzo, you would like to join me so we can so you can also see Vincenzo for those of you who don't.
Yeah, we have also prepared the chair for Vincenzo, so we are very prepared to involve him. I suggest maybe, Nienke, if you can just shift on the right, so to have also Vincenzo in the screen. Exactly, in this way you see we are appearing all on the video, and everyone will enjoy the one which is going to answer. So first of all, thank you very much for this very extensive description. I would like just to remember to the participant that if you want to intervene, don't raise a hand. Please write your name in the Q&A and we will open the microphone and the camera for you. I take my privilege as moderator to put you the first question because, of course, there is a physical distance between Africa and Europe, and especially some countries of Europe. So I suspect that as of now, maybe the main contributors in initiatives you are launching are universities and stakeholders from the center south of Europe, or what is the status of participation of the Nordic countries into it? Do we need to improve?
Indeed, as part of this process, and also we could see this also from the stakeholder event last week in Europe, it is very much geared towards, let's say, the middle, the south. I mean, the south, but it goes a little bit up. I mean, for example, we had also some stakeholders from the Netherlands, but we believe indeed that it would be very welcome if we have more participation from higher education institutions and universities in the north. I mean, some have been in Norway, for example, been involved already. Yeah, we have also. I mean, a few weeks ago, I did a presentation also in online, but with Denmark. So there were lots of stakeholders on the Danish side, but there is indeed for us a need to reach out a little bit more to the north. And if you have advice on, or maybe know why in first instance we're not so successful in this part of Europe, then it's open to your suggestions.
That's a good question. I suspect that no one have an answer for NTNU perspective. I can tell you that we have a lot of collaboration with the African continent that maybe we haven't somehow translated in projects in the European Commission. For example, there is a strong collaboration with Ghana that I notice is one of your countries active in the definition of the agenda. And we have also, if you want, in Ghana, we have also an alumni network showing that we have this exchange of students that probably are benefiting of some of the Erasmus exchange program. But of course, we are not here to talk too much about NTNU, even if NTNU is organizing this meeting. I would like to start taking the questions from the audience, which for the one connected is composed by people from all over Europe. So it's not only Nordic, even if the event is organized by NTNU. I noticed this because Jan Monteverde Akonsen is making a mentioning that the agenda is open for associated countries. But I see the first question maybe Jan, you would like to open your microphone and intervene and maybe start challenging the Commission about the participation of Norway. So we just opening the floor for Jan Monteverde Akonsen, and then we will open it for Tone Voyas Tiden afterwards. So Tone, be prepared to open your microphone and camera. So Jan, I suspect you are online now.
Yes. See, should I turn on the camera? Don't know how to turn on the camera. Anyway, you hear me?
To allow you to open also the camera. Yeah. Now you should be capable to also show yourself. Just start your video. Jan? I suspect that, yeah. Can you open your camera, Jan? And unmute your microphone? You're muted now. Yeah, okay,
Now,
you're visible.
fine. Okay, it's first of all, I want to say hello, Nienke. Ciao Massimo, ciao Vincenzo, good to see you all. As I brought into the question and answer part, as I suspect many of the participants of this webinar are Norwegian institutions, or industry businesses, I always feel the need to underline to my fellow countrymen that such initiatives as the agenda, the EU innovation agenda is actually open also to associated countries such as Norway. When people see presentations such as this, which constant references to the EU dialogue, EU members, EU institutions that can participate. Even some of my close colleagues at the Research Council of Norway think, oh, we are somehow excluded because we cannot be part of the high-level policy dialogue between Europe and Africa. Of course, we are not members. But I just would like you to reassure my fellow countrymen and women that this process is actually totally open for us as well as non-members, but associated members.
Thank you very much, Jan, for this clarification. Maybe we can expand the comment, telling which are the other associated countries that can, apart from Norway, which I suspect now is clear. This is an action open to any associated country to Horizon, correct? At least for the Horizon calls.
Yes, very briefly, absolutely. Yes, so that's exactly the case, and I take this opportunity to say hi back to Jan. I've got to say that indeed. You could see amongst the institutions that were acknowledged by Nienke in the amongst those who contributed to public consultation on the agenda, there's indeed the National Research Council of Norway, and Jan himself, we've been having this dialogue over the past few months indeed. And this is also why in the reports on the findings from the public consultation, we are referring broadly to Europe as a geographic continent rather than to the EU specifically. We had contributions coming from the UK as well, just to give a broader example, Coventry University as a practical one. Yes, I will leave it like that.
Yeah, that's I think it's an important clarification to motivate people to have a look to this and not feeling excluded from the opportunities. I think it's time to give the word to Tone, that asked to raise, and the next one after her will be Richard Tufts. So Tone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you can also open your camera.
I'm afraid I cannot find
You should.
the button.
Yeah, okay, you can put your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I cannot see any option to open the camera. Anyway, my name is Tone Alstadheim. I'm from NTNU, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Regarding this AU-EU Innovation Agenda and the African Initiative 2, I think it was called, will all the relevant calls related to this initiative, will they be issued within Horizon Europe? And I saw a slide where you mentioned that there were calls had been calls already in different clusters, or perhaps also in Pillar 3. My question is, are they all issued within Horizon Europe, or are there also calls outside that we should look for? Perhaps if they're outside, maybe they're not relevant to Norway because we're not an EU member, but of course, when they are inside Horizon Europe, they're definitely relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Tone. So there will be a special label on the calls?
Yeah, you will see this through the participant portal. So you can, if you search Africa, you'll find, I mean, that's how it was with the first Africa Initiative 1. You search by Africa in the participant portal, you get the whole list of topics that are part of this Africa Initiative. And that's how it will be again in work program 23-24 as well. As you can imagine, looking at the priorities of the cooperation and the agenda, the majority of these goals are in pillar 2. But more, let's say, the bottom-up program like Marie Curie actions is also in a bottom-up manner contributing to the agenda. And finally, I mean, because it's more innovation oriented, we also expect goals in the innovation ecosystem work program, especially to support further the development and the implementation of this agenda through coordination in Europe. What I also wanted to add maybe to what Vincenzo said is that for those of you who are familiar, we have, of course, the European Research Area Forum, and one of the subgroups is focused on the global approach. Their associated countries are can also participate, and we have, as part of this subgroup, set up this Africa pilot, where we aim at where we discuss and really also want to operationalize a closer collaboration between what we will fund through Horizon and what different countries, how different countries are going to use their programs towards this joint vision.
Thank you. The next one is an old friend, Richard. You can open your camera and microphone. Yeah.
Massimo, thank you very much. Thank you for the very interesting presentation of a topic I really don't know very much, so it was very interesting to learn, and thanks very much for the presentation. The question I have, in one of the slides, you mentioned no working in silos in the EU and the AU. What I'd like to know is how, I think it's tomorrow, that the Council will approve the new European Innovation Agenda. And I was wondering how far you are linking what you're doing with what's coming up in the new the European version. And there is one specific point I want to raise is in the new innovation agenda, they talk a lot about ecosystems. I think you've mentioned that as well, and this sort of quadruple helix and partnerships and so on. But one of the other points comes up, and this is from my own sort of interest, of course, is smart specialization. And in the European edition, if you like, there's a strong role for this innovation agenda to be linked to what we would call smart specialization strategies, so that it would be linked to certain regional priorities and very much place-based, or now what is sometimes called place responsiveness. So I'd like to know, okay, you're dealing with a huge concept, you know, I realize the constraints and everything on this, but was any thinking of that type taken up in the discussion?
Okay, yeah. I mean, the European Innovation Agenda is, in first instance, of course, very focused on Europe. What do we need in Europe, the needs in Europe, and what do we need to improve and develop in Europe? The actions are all around this, at the same time recognizing the importance of international cooperation. So this, let's say, joint endeavor with the African Union is taking inspiration, building on what we in parallel are trying to achieve at the European level. But because it's a joint agenda, it of course needs to take account of the different needs on both sides, and where this actually converges. And this is an extremely difficult exercise also, because on the African continent, of course, you cannot always compare the different countries and different innovation ecosystems with each other. But I don't know if Vincenzo would like to go a bit more in detail, of the specialization and the smart specialization, in the ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you, Nienke. Perhaps very briefly on the importance of the ecosystems, indeed, that were invoked during the presentation earlier on, but also indeed that are referred to in the European Innovation Agenda. So we are very much aware of the importance indeed of connecting ecosystems within Africa, because indeed there's ecosystems at national levels, and then of course regional level, and then continental level, and then of course between Africa and Europe. And in fact, in that very spirit, this is what we try and do with the 2 days of the Stakeholder Event in Nairobi, where not only in the afternoon of day 2, we include that session of the AU-EU Innovation Fair with startups and innovators presenting their solutions to investors or peers and so on and so forth. But we also made sure they were introduced by their respective innovation hubs and incubators. In a way, they were also introducing themselves, explaining the history and finding and revealing, disclosing the connections within the African ecosystem and African-European interface on where they're placing themselves. And then, of course, there is only one part of the bigger picture, because, of course, when we talk about innovation ecosystems, we need to take into account centers of excellence, clusters of excellence across higher education institutions, but we also need to take into account the galaxy of private sector actors, either from Europe operating in Africa or vice versa from Africa operating in Europe, but also local ones. And I think the scoping there is not enough yet in terms of the granularity. So I don't know if I'm addressing that point of the question, but work is in progress, and indeed we are very much aware of the need for operating in an ecosystem way, and certainly breaking the silos as much as we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a question from, can you just lower a bit the screen while I invite Gilbert Siame to be ready for posing his question, or go up. Yeah, stop. There is a question from Johanna Steinhauer, which I think is already answered by your slides. No, basically the sources for the funding. So somehow, maybe while you are shortly elaborating on it, I suspect is Horizon Europe, but you also mentioned Erasmus Plus and other sources. I would like to invite Gilbert to be prepared to open the camera. I don't know if you want to further elaborate on this or.
Yeah. No, indeed, that is, I think, one of the slides I showed. No, that this is not just about Horizon. It's about EU programs, but also at the national level. However, other EU programs don't always necessarily work in the same way. Yeah? The Global Europe program from DG International Partnerships doesn't work through launching calls for proposals. It's more directly looking at, because it's capacity building, so it's more directly looking at the institutions or initiatives that it wishes to fund. So no, it's not just about Horizon Europe, and this is an extremely important message that we would like to pass on. That this is a combination. It's not a new funding program, or it's not a new funding proposal for Horizon Europe. It is a vision that we are aiming to implement with the different instruments at our disposal at EU level, AU level, and the national levels. We're not there yet, but that's our.
Very good. So Gilbert, can you introduce shortly yourself and pose your question? We still have 5 minutes to go. We try to accommodate all the questions if we are very efficient.
Sure, thank you so much. My name is Gilbert Siame. I'm from NTNU, from Architecture and Planning Department. I have 2 quick questions. The first one is, while EU is putting in money, I would like to know if AU is also putting in money. And if not, how is this going to affect the participation of other countries, smaller economies like, let's say, Malawi, to increase their number in participating on this collaboration? The last part is, given the introduction of fees in Norway, I was wondering if there's a possibility at this stage to strengthen the component for exchange between African scholars and EU, and particularly the Nordic and Norway scholars. Is there a possibility for that in this whole program? for physical exchange, actual travel, particularly for young scholars as part of the capacity development program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. I mean, certainly not too easy question when it comes to the contribution of the African Union. So work is in progress. When we were showing that slide on the, how to make this happen in terms of instruments, in terms of funding, this is a table to be taken into account as in the making, in progress indeed. So what we put there black and white are the initiatives that are being deployed, because we have secured them, but there's an ongoing dialogue there to make sure those instruments increase in terms of numbers and increase in terms of budgets and participation. So involving not only, and we start by talking from the EU side, EU member states, we are part of this discussion with them to make sure that indeed bilateral cooperation initiatives are indeed aligned with the scope of the AU innovation agenda, or benefit from a, so to say, a AU innovation agenda stamp with the instrument. But we also want to make sure that indeed there's a cornership also in the support coming from the African Union, not only Commission, not only development agencies like ODA and EPAD, but also member states. So that's certainly work that is being steered, is work that is being done in a cold fashion. So of course with the leadership from the African side of the African Union Commission, and of course the dialogue with the member states. And I don't know, Nienke,
yeah, maybe to give an example, and I guess Jan, who spoke first, knows it well. We have already quite some examples of partnerships. We call them partnerships nowadays. In the past, we called them ERANETs under Horizon 2020, where we have joint projects, programs. I mean, LEAP for FNSSA in the area of food and nutrition security, or LEAP-RE in the area of renewable energies, where over, I think, 80 countries on both sides are involved and are coming to the table with their own research funding. So that where it may not necessarily come from the African Union Commission, countries involved such as South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Senegal, I don't remember all of them, but they really come to this type of partnerships with their own research funding. Or sometimes it's also in kind. If you look at the EDCTP joint undertaking, there are 16 sub-Saharan African countries part of this that are members of this partnership, and also contributing with existing programs to the cooperation. So it's not a development program. We're not. It's not about Europe, let's say, supporting Africa. We really like to see this as a partnership where we are agreeing on the priorities, developing it together, but also implementing it as much as possible together, including from the financial side.
Thank you. We are approaching the end. I think we have time for one final live question. I would suggest to take the one from Tobias. So we open the floor. Meanwhile, we can probably give a fast answer to Margherita Cappelletto, which is asking if the Africa 2 instrument enable the participation of countries, including those not associated to Horizon Europe. Is this correct? I suspect yes. No, the calls are in line with the rules of Horizon, so even non-associated countries are welcome. So the answer is yes. And to Johan, to my colleague Johan Husted, director of TSO Energy, he underlined what we have in NTNU. So we have 2,500 alumni from Africa, because we are cooperating since long, as I told at the beginning, with African universities. So again, I suspect the answer is yes, no, provided we have a good joint project, our alumni and their universities can be part of consortia. So the answer is yes. So Tobias, you are last but not least in our questions. So be smart in doing it. Welcome in the webinar.
Hello, Massimo, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, just a short question. I saw there was a slide.
Shortly
about...
introduce yourself, Tobias.
Yes, I'm Tobias Badeström, NCP for Missions Cluster 2 and European Research Area in Horizon Europe. And I was for many years in Brussels. I looked at your slide, which was interesting, about projects between African and European partners. And there were very low numbers for the most specific social sciences and humanities part. And of course, in Cluster 2, there are topics about geopolitics, democracy, human rights, social innovation, etc. And this should be very interesting and relevant for African partners. What do you think can be done to increase this closer cooperation between Europe and Africa in this field? Thank you.
Thank you, Tobias. Challenging question. I see the panic in the eyes of our guests.
It just starts.
So thank you very much, Tobias, and pleased to meet you. And very important question indeed. So these numbers, the numbers that we showed in terms of granted projects, are to be taken also into account with a degree of caution, in the sense that there's a tiny discrepancy between the retained proposals as we speak and the projects that have been granted, because indeed, as you know better than I do, being an NCP, there's a sort of lag phase, throughout the granting process. So hopefully, first part of the answer to your question, hopefully within the next couple of weeks or months, those numbers will increase for social sciences and humanities, and those in the cluster 2 that you referred to. But the question will still remain, right? And so what could we do from our side? I think very operationally, indeed, and we're planning a series of webinars for next year, like we did for last year for the Work Programme 1, trying to disseminate as much as possible and share information about these clusters, about what's in the package of Africa Initiative 2, and the fact that there's indeed space for social science and humanities as well. And also to be looked within the perspective of the other clusters. The example that we brought in the slide of public health or food security, we want those topics to be also tackled in a multidimensional way by looking at what are the social determinants and the socioeconomic aspects linked to that. So I think information and dissemination could be emphasized from both sides, and engaging with the respective departments within target universities, within potential cluster member universities that indeed excel in certain areas or that are particularly engaged in certain.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, also very practical. I think first of all, indeed, it's important to underline what you say, that the SSH dimension is not just in cluster 2, it's a very important element of the different topics in cluster 5 and 6 or 1 as well. Secondly, we're going to disseminate the information on our side, let's say at the Africa level, but we also know that it's very important to disseminate the information at the European level. So in the info days that are coming up, there will be, I think, around 20 minutes of presentation on the international dimension, including the Africa Initiative. So really also explaining what the possibilities are. And then lastly, as NCP, I don't know if you have any context. I mean, several of the African countries also have NCPs. There's a whole NCP network on the continent. We will also support those NCPs from the Commission side. We're thinking also how best to do this, for example, by bringing them together once a year, perhaps also with European NCPs. But on your side, yeah, maybe you also are already reaching out to some of the NCPs in Africa. You wish to do so. That's another option, of course.
Perfect. So we are 5 minutes later than programmed. I'm very sorry for this, but I thought that the number of questions and the topics that we have discussed were important, justifying a little delay this time. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for our guests, to which I would like to devote a virtual applause, because we are in a virtual world in this moment. I would like to invite you to follow us for the future appointments with 1 Hour with Europe. By registering to this event, you are now part of our mailing list, so you are going to receive extra information with our new guests. And thank you very much for your participation. I'm looking forward to meet you next time on this screen.